Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, yesterday, the Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, that's one David Davis, took to the Commons for the first time to tell MPs about the government's plans for Brexit. He said it was something he was determined to deliver as soon as possible. But many Remain supporting MPs accused him of giving next to no detail. Let's have a look.
Our instructions from the British people are clear. Britain is leaving the European Union. There will be no attempt to stay in the EU by the back door. No attempt to delay, frustrate or thwart the will of the British people. No attempt to engineer a second referendum. Because some people didn't like the first answer. Now, naturally, people want to know what Brexit will mean. Simply, it means leaving the European Union.
The spin before today's statement was so much promise we heard that we were going to hear what the government's strategy for Brexit was. But what we've heard instead hasn't been a strategy, it hasn't been a thought-out plan, it's just been more empty platitudes.
Can I ask him, when he gets to the dispatch box, to confirm to us that in leaving the European Union, the number one thing that is absolutely not negotiable is that this United Kingdom will take control of its borders and the laws that are relevant to that, and that is not negotiable for any other deal.
No one expects him to have worked out all of the answers yet, but we do expect him to be able to set out the outline of some kind of plan. And today we have heard nothing on that.
Ah, yes, a most exotic delicacy in the House. Mr. Michael Gove.
We have seen a record increase in service industries growth, a record increase in manufacturing industry growth, a 3.3% increase in motor car sales, and we have also seen the Speaker of the US Congress, the Prime Minister of Australia and the Prime Minister of New Zealand all pressing for free trade deals with this country, while the Deputy Chancellor of Germany has acknowledged that the EU-US trade deal is dead in the water.
Michael Gove ending that report sounding a little different, I think. We're joined now by Peter Lilly, who spoke in yesterday's Commons debate as well, and of course Caroline Lucas is still with us. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Peter Lilly, he didn't say anything at all. We're none the wiser after that debate, are we?
Well, at the beginning of a process you can't outline how it's going to develop, but this sort of call for some plan is a bit like people saying to George Washington, "What's your plan for independence?" He would have replied, "To be independent." What's the constitution going to be? We're going to have a constitutional conference. What would Gandhi's reply to India, his demand for Indian independence be? What's the plan? It's that we be independent. The plan for Brexit is that we take control of our laws, our money and our borders.
But no one knows how.
You reaffirmed that.
But no one knows how,
yes, we do, by an act of Parliament.
Right, but no one knows exactly how it's going to happen. Even David Davis himself said he's going to have some sort of nationwide consultation. On what?
He's going to consult industry and business and environmental sectors and so on what their priorities will be if there are elements that require negotiation. What I was disappointed slightly is that he didn't make a distinction between issues which are matters for decision by the British government and issues which are a matter for negotiation between ourselves and the EU 27.
Right. Which issues are up for negotiation in your mind with the EU member states?
Well, clearly, once we've left all in preparation to leave, we want to discuss what the trading relationship will be between Britain and the EU subsequently.
Right. He hasn't got a plan for that yet?
Well, there are only two conceivable options. One is that we trade on the same basis as the EU's three biggest trading partners, America, China and Russia, which is on WTO tariffs. The alternative is we continue at present with no tariffs.
Right.
So it'll be one of those two. It'll depend on what they want. If they want to go to WTO tariffs, that's fine by us. It'll be rather bad for them.
Right. Except we knew that. We've known that for several months. no work has been done, has it, in terms of developing either of those two case scenarios? So we're still having...
You don't need any work. They're both very simple.
Right. Well, then why haven't they decided which one they're going for?
It's not us that has to decide, it's what the EU has to decide.
Right, and no presentations have been made as yet. I mean,
Well, the press hasn't started yet.
Right. It feels, though, doesn't it, as if there hasn't been any work done over the summer, that we are no further forward in the minds of many of your colleagues as to where we're going to go with this exiting from the EU. And people are impatient and business will feel uncertainty will grow. It's not at the moment. Clearly, the figures are there and there's been some sort of economic bounce, but uncertainty will grow.
Well, that was my worry, that we don't want this process to go on any longer than necessary. The Article 50 arbitrarily takes a 2-year period. Why 2 years? Why not 1 year or 3 years? Or no explanation. There's a danger we think it automatically has to take 2 years. My question, I said, will he assure us that he'll do it as quickly as possible, that 2 years will be a maximum, not a minimum, and that we'll go for what is the minimum with appropriate preparation?
Right. Do you agree with Peter Lilly? It should be quicker, it should be sooner rather than later. We should be invoking Article 50 as soon as possible.
No, I don't, and I've heard nothing from Peter Lilly or indeed from David Davis that gives us any serious indication that the government knows where it's going with Brexit. You know, I believe that Parliament really was quite shocked that after 2 hours, genuinely, people were no more wise after that 2-hour presentation than they were before it. And you would have thought that in this time, David Davis and his colleagues would have come up with some kind of set of options, because I don't think Peter is quite right. It's not just the case you can either have WTO or nothing at all. You've got the possibility of a kind of a Norway type arrangement where you'd still have access to the single market.
Oh, he ruled that out, so that was a progress.
Yes, and Theresa May says that's not going to happen because there's not going to be freedom of movement. I mean, we have clarity on some things, don't we? No points-based system. There is going to be a control of, well, that's what Theresa May said, no points-based system.
She didn't rely just on a points-based system. She wanted an actual numerical total as well.
Yes.
You may have points within that to decide within that total number who you're going to take.
But she didn't want to have the Australian points-based system alone to control freedom of movement. And so we do know that some things are going to happen now and some things have been ruled out in terms of Brexit. So there has been some progress.
Well, I don't know that there really has, in the sense that she's also saying she wants to consult with the country. We also know that when people were voting Brexit, they were not necessarily saying which of the many options on offer they actually wanted, what Brexit would look like. And that's why I think it's crucial that we need some time here, not to try and do it as fast as Peter would like, so that you've got more of a time for consultation, more of a time to try to bring the country back together in some way, because this has been one of the most divisive elements that's happened in our country for decades. And it seems to me that we should be using that time to see how much of a compromise we can get that will meet the different desires of the people who voted Remain, people who voted to leave, to see how much of a deal going forward we could have that would, for example, make sure we keep all the environmental protections that we need, that would keep the workers' rights and the human rights. And I think there's still a lot of people who would want to see some element of free movement.
Right, well, and on that element of free movement and trying to keep some of the protections that Caroline Lucas is talking about, that's what will happen, of course, over time. There will be a compromise.
No, I agree with Caroline that we should try and adopt all existing EU laws and regulations into British law. That's what countries do when they become independent. When India became independent, it adopted all imperial law into its own law. Likewise, when Czech and Slovak republics separated, they retained their existing laws. Then they're able, at their own leisure, to amend and alter any that they think will be needed. An awful lot of it's quite sensible.
But it'll take time. But it will take time, won't it? I mean, it can't be done that quickly.
No, that can be done very quickly.
Well, how can it be done quickly when there hasn't been much work done beforehand because there couldn't be? The civil service are playing catch-up. There wasn't a department for exiting the EU. They've drafted in people. I know because I've spoken to some of the civil servants from other departments. They are playing catch-up here.
Yes, well, and now you're acknowledging that there was a lot of work to do, and they've probably been doing it during the summer.
The
most interesting question was actually the answer the most interesting answer from David Davis was in response to the question from Owen Paterson, who proposed that we do what other countries have done when they become independent, incorporate all existing law into our own law. And he said there may be some difficulties about this, and the civil service is working on that.
Yes.
Now, I'd like to know what those difficulties are. I understood that senior experts in constitutional law have discussed it with the cabinet officials, and they thought it was perfectly possible. If it's going to be more complex than a one-clause bill, let's know a bit about it in due course. But that's the sort of lines we'll be working on. we will adopt the existing
Right, but he did say it was
thousands of pieces of legislation, aren't they? Even in the environmental sector
in India.
at all.
Yes, but he said it's going to be
complicated.
He did acknowledge it would be
a straightforward process. You adopt what you've already got.
But it's not the adoption that's difficult, it's the deciding which ones you're going to dump.
No, you don't dump any on day one. None at all.
No, not on day one, but you do, as you have said, then you have to decide which...
you do.
But how long would that take, and how many pieces of legislation are we talking about?
We had a review of all existing British law under Mrs Thatcher in the 80s. It took us some years to go through it, but that's a different matter. That will be done as a sovereign, independent parliament making its own decisions.
I see.
The misunderstanding, which has been perpetrated by Gus O'Donnell's silly programme, which the BBC gave time to, is that you can't do it until you've gone through every bit of legislation one by one. You don't do that. You adopt the corpus and then change it at your own leisure.
Let me ask on something different briefly before we end this, because you said that a rerun of the referendum would be an affront to democracy. So why are you calling for a second referendum on the terms of the deal?
What I said would be an affront to democracy, and I believe it would be to simply try to do what the petition that we were debating yesterday said, which was essentially rerun the 23rd of June, that same referendum, but change the rules, have a higher threshold. That, I think, would be deeply anti-democratic. What I do think would be fair would be to say that people should have a say over what Brexit looks like. The whole Brexit campaign was based on this idea of giving people back control. Good. Give people back control over what Brexit is actually going to look like. So after 18 months, or whatever this new package is going to look like, I think that should come back to the country for people to have a say. Is that what you want? And if it isn't, then we go back and we get a different kind of Brexit. I'm not trying to rerun the 23rd of June.
But you are calling for a second referendum.
On the substance. And I'm saying that if that didn't pass, then we'd go back and have a different kind of Brexit, a closer relationship perhaps to the EU. But I'm not trying to rerun the 23rd of June.
Would that be fair?
It would be unnecessary, deeply insulting to the electorate.
Not at all. Why is giving people a say insulting to the electorate?
No, we know what they were voting on. They were voting on, did they want control of their laws, their money and their borders?
And you can do that in a million different ways, Peter.
No.
And you don't know whether or not it's going
you
to
end
have
up
one
with control. Once you've got control, you can use that control in a different way as an independent country.
The shape of a Brexit deal could look very different under different interpretations.
The shape of deals with other countries, but the taking back of control is...
How many environmental protections going to be there? What kind of workers' rights? What level of freedom of movement? Will there be any?
Can you tell me if we stay in what the British Parliament will do next year? You can't.
And
we're going to have a referendum every year just because you don't know what the future
Parliament is. And on that, we're going to have
do.
to leave it. We will come back to that issue, of course, time and time again. Peter Lilly, thank you.
Thank you.
I've been again.